Section 7.1. In this lesson, we are going to be learning how to solve a quadratic equation using the square root method. Let's see a few examples. Now, before we see the examples, let's remember this, that if you have something like x squared and you wish to cancel the square, you're going to do the square root. So the same applies if we have the square root and we want to cancel the radical, we can square both sides. So you can say that the opposite of a square is to square root it. Now this is the same vice versa. So again, if you have the radical and you want to cancel the radical, you square it. If you have the square and you want to cancel it, you take the square root. Okay? Now, for this first example, we need to solve for x. Now I need to solve for x, therefore I need to cancel the square. So in order to cancel the square, I'm going to square root both sides. So I need to solve for x. I'm going to rewrite my problem. In order to cancel the square, I'm going to square root both sides. So then this cancels the square. I am left with x equals, now this is very important, plus or minus the square root of 36. What is the square root of 36? 6. So x equals 6 and negative 6. Whenever you take the square root of both sides, so in this step here, you need to remember the plus and minus. Remember to add the plus and minus. Okay? So these are your answers. 2 answers. Let's see this example. For this example, the first thing we need to do is to isolate the variable. So in order to isolate the variable, I am going to subtract 50 to both sides. And I'm still using the square root method. So this is what I'm left with. Negative 50. Now I need to divide by 2. X equals negative 25. Now, in order to cancel the square, I'm going to square root both sides. This is where we get the using the square root method. So this and this cancels. I am left with x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 25. Now this is very important. Let's put this on the side. Whenever we are dealing, so whenever we have negatives inside the radical, we're dealing with imaginary numbers. Oh, what was that? Okay. Negatives inside the radicals, we have imaginary numbers. So, something to keep in mind, let's use blue. If I have the square root of negative 1, this is I, which stands for imaginary number. So, for this part here, square root of negative 25, I'm going to break the negative 25 into square root of negative 1 and square root of 25. I know that the square root of negative 1 is I, and I know the square root of 25 is 5. Therefore, my answer are plus or minus 5i. you can rewrite that as 5i comma negative 5i as your answers. Very important to keep in mind this, the I. So whenever we have negatives inside the radicals, we have to think about the imaginary numbers. Let's see another example. Okay, so we are still using the square root method in order to solve for the variable. So notice that the variable is inside this radical, inside the parentheses. So what I need to do is cancel the square. I'm going to rewrite it. Okay, so in order to cancel the square, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. This cancels that. So I am left with 3w plus 9 equals plus or minus, let's not forget that, square root of 60. Okay, now before we move forward, well, we can have two options. We can continue to isolate the w, or we can simplify the radical. So let's just go ahead and continue to isolate. No, let's do first simplify the radical. Let's write that down. Here, keep making this up. Here, we're going to put a note. Simplify the radical now. And now we need to know we need to simplify because 60 is not a perfect square. So we need to do that. Okay, so I'm going to take this on the side. This is going to be my side work. And I'm going to break 60 into the square root of 4 times the square root of 15. 15 is not a perfect square, but 4 is. So the square root of 4 is 2. And then I have 15 inside the radical. I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my problem with that, this right here, replacing the square root of 60. Okay, so that's what I have. Now I'm going to minus the 9 to both sides. I am left with 3w equals negative 9 plus or minus 2 square root of 15. Okay. Then I need to divide by 3 because I need to isolate the w. Whatever I do to one side, I must do to everything. So then I have w equals a negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3 plus or minus 2 square root of 15 divided by 3. Okay, so my two answers, let me see if I have more space in the other side. No, I don't have more space. So let's rewrite it a little bit because I want you to see how this will look. So I have, going this way, w equals negative 3 plus 2 square root of 15 over 3, and w also equals negative 3 minus 2 square root of 15 over, over 3. Now, you might want to simplify the 15 and the 3, but you cannot because the 15 is inside the radical, right? You might want to say negative 3 plus 2, give me negative 1, but again, the 2 right here, this 2 over here, it's together with the 15. So negative 3 and 2 square root of 15 are not like terms. Therefore, we cannot put them together. So those are your two answers. Okay. So there we have 3 examples on how to solve quadratic equations using the square root method. So that's what we did in this lesson. We solve quadratic equations using the square root method.